My little brother Adam stood at the bottom of the giant stone steps of our front porch taunting, "You won't do it, you chicken, you won't do it." The dare was to jump from the very top step to the grass beyond the bottom step. It was about 8 feet, but it might as well have been 800 feet from my 11-year-old perspective. Back then, most everything seemed out of my reach. I wasn't popular. No one ever picked me for teams at recess. I was skinny, awkward, and a major nerd. My brother's taunting reminded me of all of it. So I was determined to prove him wrong, determined to land at the bottom of the steps, standing directly in front of his sneering face. That would shut him up. I took a deep breath, crouched low, teeth clenched, and leapt forward as mightily as I could. And as my feet slid out from under me on the damp grass, my head barely cleared the bottom step. I hit the ground with a hard thud that forced all of the air out of my lungs. And as I lay there gasping, "I can't breathe," my brother stood over me in peals of triumphant laughter. And a voice inside my head was laughing just as hard. 35 years later, just past midnight, I was lying on my back again. This time, all I heard was the whirs and beeps of machines. The telephone next to the hospital bed rang. The voice on the other end said, "This is Dr. Puri. I wanted to call you myself with the results." And then came a pause. You know that pause that feels like a decade? "Your daughter has had a stroke." I didn't hear another word. I looked over at my beautiful, sleeping 16-year-old daughter, and as my hand reached for hers, the air left my lungs just as sharply as it did that day I was a kid, and I was gasping the words again, "I can't breathe." Now, these weren't the only times I've had the wind knocked out of me, and they wouldn't be the last. But the next time it happened, I wouldn't let it steal my voice. I would find my voice. I would find me. And I'd been looking for me my whole life. Well, there's a voice inside each of us. Some hear it early and follow it unashamedly all their life. It's the voice of our true, authentic self that urges us to think and play and act, create, do, and just be everything we were designed to be with joyful abandon. But for a lot of us, the way we were created to be, the way that feels the closest to our own soul, somewhere along the way became not good enough. Perhaps you can relate. You have your own story of the wind getting knocked out of you, of living life on other people's terms, by rules and conditions you didn't set up to satisfy someone else's agenda, of allowing your inner critic to take control of your life. My inner critic had completely hijacked my true self and kept me on a wild pendulum ride, swinging back and forth between perfectionism and judgment to anxiety and depression. Oh, and she excelled at it. Adoption. Your own mother didn't even want you. Abuse at the hands of a family child predator. You're bad, and it's all your fault. Anorexia. You're worthless. It'd be better if you just disappeared. After my daughter recovered, we went into counseling to learn how to move forward in a healthy way after a life-threatening event with a child. And because of a very astute therapist, during one of our sessions, my daughter was able to tell me that she was in an abusive relationship. When the story all came tumbling out amid her sobs, I felt the air leave my lungs once again. And as my inner critic tried to rise, the words that came weren't, "I can't breathe." They were a very primal, "enough." While the injury the stroke had caused to her brain and body had terrified me, the violation to her mind, body, and spirit devastated me and would change the trajectory of my life. You see, I'd done everything right. I'd asked questions, met the parents, been inside their house, and still my precious daughter had been wounded. But it had been that way my whole life. I'd always been a perfectionist, a rule follower. I did exactly what was expected of me, what I was told, what family, religion, and others said was best. Over and over, I dismissed my own thoughts and wishes and needs. I ignored the whisper I'd been hearing my entire life that I could trust my own thoughts and feelings. But now it was quite clear that everything my inner critic told me was a big, fat lie. Perfectionism was a lie. It wasn't until the situation with my daughter that for some reason I'd finally had enough, and I went into battle with my inner critic. I set out to discover my God-given natural strengths and embrace them for the gift that they were intended to be to me. I remembered an assessment I'd done years earlier while in an executive position called the Gallup-Clifton Strengths Finder. Through a series of questions about your preferences, tendencies, and values, scientists at Gallup reveal your strengths ordered from number 1 through 34. Things like activator and command, intellection, futuristic, and maximizer, just to name a few. The assessment is so granular, the odds of you and another person having the exact same order of just the top 5 is 1 in 33 million. I was astounded by the accuracy of my assessment, but not exactly thrilled with my top 5 results. Input, intellection, learner, activator, and responsibility. Snore. Except for activator, I didn't exactly consider them dynamic. I wanted something like command and maximizer. But as I began learning more about my unique strengths, I came to realize just how they make me exceptional and pretty darn amazing. So I leaned into them hard from a work performance mindset, because I had read that people who put their strengths into practice every day are 6 times more likely to be engaged at work and 8% more productive than their counterparts. I realized significant results in both of those areas. My input, intellection, and learner working together ensured that I came to the table with accurate information my team needed for projects. My activator took the leadership action so the projects moved forward. And my responsibility theme made sure that what I said I would do, I did with excellence. But later, the experience with my daughter made me consider my strengths in a more holistic way, not just work, but in every aspect of my life. People who effectively utilize their strengths daily are 3 times more likely to report having an excellent quality of life. And I was missing the mark in that department. I wanted to know more about how I could move forward in living my life in a way that felt true to me by leaning into what made me uniquely strong. I began putting my strengths into practice in my everyday life, and by simply being more intentional and aware, my life began to transform in a way that invited my authentic self to rise and gave me the power to calm my inner critic. Now, it's a journey I'm still on, but the transformation was so profound, I eventually left my 9-to-5 job and became a certified Gallup Strengths Coach. I now get to help others derive joy and confidence from the same name it, claim it, and aim it strengths approach that redefine my life. And to see it in action every day in people's lives still amazes me. Well, take Katie, for instance. Katie was extremely successful as the director of tourism in Shelby County, Kentucky. But she was young and feeling a bit unfulfilled and starting to wonder, do I stay or do I go? Then she heard of a job opening as the senior vice president of the Kentucky Derby Museum. We both live in the horse part of Kentucky. And if you've ever seen the most exciting 2 minutes in sports on TV, you know that we take this very seriously. So of course she was interested, but also being flooded with thoughts from her inner critic. You're too young for this high-level position. No one's going to take you seriously. If you make a mistake, everyone's going to know. It's the Kentucky Derby, after all. Are you really going to abandon your team that you've worked so hard to build? You know, you're not going to have time for your kids if you take this job. Sound familiar? But when Katie and I looked at her strengths profile, we realized that focus set very high for her. So it came down to one simple question. Where could Katie put her focus to create the life that she wanted? She already knew the answer, but just needed a little reminder. She applied, had the interview, and she got it. Now she is the senior vice president of the Kentucky Derby Museum. She recently told me that knowing her strengths gave her the confidence to make big, bold decisions for her own future. Shanna had a similar experience. Shanna was a very successful hairstylist with Aveda, but she had a dream to own her own high-end salon. She invested everything, her life savings, blood, sweat, tears, sacrificed time with her family into getting it off the ground. It was her dream, and she made it happen. And then she met her nightmare client. Every time she'd come in, Shanna could feel her blood pressure rise. This client always wanted top shelf results, but at a supercuts price. She wouldn't pay for the good service, so she was never happy with the results and would text Shanna later to fix it, for free, of course. One time, she even expected Shanna to come in over Christmas break. A few years passed, and Shanna began to lose confidence in herself, even though she is an exceptionally gifted hairstylist, always in high demand, with a wait list to get into her chair. She dreaded every day this client was on the schedule. They became more passive aggressive, and with each appointment, Shanna was left feeling smaller. When she finally talked to me about it, she was in tears. She wasn't even sure she wanted to keep going at all. So we looked at her strengths, and futuristic was one of her top 5. So I asked her, what does the future of this business look like? And does the future you're envisioning include this type of client? The answer was obvious. So she broke up with the client and hasn't looked back. Now she says she gets up in the morning excited for what each day holds. And she recently celebrated the salon's 5th anniversary. Anyone can do this. You can do this. Your strengths can help you to calm your inner critic, take back your life, or maybe find it for the very first time, and do the thing that you feel calling to you from deep inside. So if you've had the wind knocked out of you, get up, go toe-to-toe with your inner critic by realizing the power of your unique strengths. And while you're at it, make the most of them by serving your corner of the world in the way that only you can. Thank you.